Why is the rum gone? Ahoy mateys, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing a piratey 5x5. So before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is your favorite piratey book. If you are unaware, my 5x5 is a series in which I am trying to find 5-star reads. I have not succeeded thus far, but I will put a link to the playlist right over here in which you can see all of the other themes I've done. This time, obviously, it is pirates, and I am so excited. I will give you guys a quick synopsis of the 5 books I will be reading. After that, I will give a halfway update with an estimated rating, followed by a final update with an actual rating. Starting out is Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller, and I believe in this one we are following our pirate captain who has actually allowed herself to be captured. She has done so to search this other ship for a hidden treasure map. I also know it has enemies to lovers, so of course I am very excited about that. If I do enjoy this one, I will likely pick up the second, which I think is Daughter of the Siren Queen? Question mark. Following that is Seafire by Natalie C. Parker. We are following a young woman whose entire family was killed by some type of a pirate king. Since then, she has now started to captain her own ship and leads a crew of other women who have a similar past as her own. However, when her best friend is saved by one of the men that works under this pirate captain, everything she knows starts to twist and change. After that will be Fable by Adrienne Young. I've heard pretty great things about this, and in this one we are following our main character, Fable, whose father is some kind of a big name trader, but when she was 14, he abandoned her on this island that is mostly inhabited by thieves. She's had to survive on this island for the past 4 years and is trying to find a way back to her father to get what she believes she deserves. It worked really well this month because this was a pick for the book club I do with both my best friends. After that is the one that I must admit I'm looking most forward to, which is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. I believe this is a Little Mermaid retelling in which we are following a siren who has been turned into a human and told to kill the prince and bring his heart back to her people to prove her loyalty. But I think she actually ends up being found by the prince after she is turned into a human, and he is supposed to be some kind of a siren hunter also. Does this just not already sound fantastic? And then finally I have All the Stars and Teeth by Adalyn Grace. This cover is so beautiful and I am so excited for it because of that. I think this one is following our main character, Amora, princess, and has magical abilities, but something goes wrong at her coronation and she ends up having to team up with a pirate to try and save her kingdom. Okay mateys, so that is it for now. I will talk to y'all again when I have an update for the first book. Hey y'all, so officially I've hit the halfway point into Fable by Adrienne Young, and thus far, I'm actually enjoying it. I have to say, the story has me hooked in, even though there isn't really a lot going on. This is particularly surprising because this book was also the pick for the book club I do with my 2 best friends, and this was Allie's pick. It's an ongoing joke that anytime Allie recommends me a book, I never like it, but I'm actually enjoying this. I will say there isn't really a lot happening. The plot was fairly limited going in, and the driving force that's mentioned in the synopsis actually just occurred at the halfway point, so I'm curious as to where the rest of the book and the second book is going to go then. One thing is I am a little bit surprised that this is lacking that kind of adventure feel that I expect in a pirate book. Thus far, there is a limited number of characters, and I am thankful for that, but even with it, I don't feel like I know any of them very well, apart from our main character, Fable. She's pretty rough and tumble. She really wants to prove herself as worthy and smart when it comes to the seas. She actually does know a lot about sea life in theory, but in practice, she isn't always the brightest bulb in the pack. Unfortunately, I have caught a whiff of a love triangle. I'm really hoping that isn't going to be the case. For one, I don't like love triangles, but for two, I also just don't really want Fable to get into a romantic relationship. I'd rather spend the time focusing on her and seeing her growth as a character, seafaring woman and eventually pirate, hopefully. The biggest thing I have to praise is the atmosphere of this book. It has been amazing. There is so much sea terminology being used. The writing in creating the setting really does pull you in. It's very whimsical, and I've just really enjoyed that aspect of it. But this is a fantasy book. Excluding a few things that kind of skirt the line of reality, this more seems just like historical fiction in a made-up world. There is a map towards the beginning of the book, and although it is quite quite limited, so I can't imagine that is the entire world. It's still fairly normal, it seems. There's nothing fantastical on the map to give us some indication of where the story will go. So I am very interested to see if the book and the plot might start to go in more of a magical direction further in. There has been a fair amount of world building around this that sticks with the whole trader lifestyle and the sea life terminology that I mentioned, which I've been very invested in and I think has built up the world in a natural and often come up in an organic way. It doesn't feel info dumpy. Even though I don't really know where the book is going, I am enjoying it. Part of me would say, since I have no idea what's happening with the plot, I should put this at a 3 stars, but I'm liking the book much more than a 3-star rating warrants, but I don't know if I'm gonna love it as much to give it a 4-star. For the time being, I think my estimated rating is going to be 3.5. I really do have high hopes that the second half of this book is going to carry through with the intrigue it's developed in me. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished reading Fable by Adrienne Young, and this is gonna be a really weird book to rate. We really didn't get much more depth in any of the characters apart from Fable. There were 5 other named characters on the ship that were important. 2 of them kind of just felt like they were there for diversity's sake because they didn't really have additional personalities past like 1 or 2 traits. The other female character, 𝗖𝘁, did eventually start to have a bit more depth to her and had some additional characteristics. She was pretty sassy. She cared a great deal and was very protective, but in a very aggressive sort of way. Then the love interest character had no depth and no background was ever discussed around him until the last 30 minutes of the audiobook. Because of that, I had no interest in the romantic inclination that she had towards him or he had towards her, because it doesn't seem like it's built on anything. I don't know anything about him, so I don't understand what Fable sees in him. Thus, I don't want them to become a couple. Honestly, I really feel like this needed so much more development, and maybe given that there's a second book, that should have been dragged out a bit more and we should have learned more about him. Thankfully, one thing I was fearful of happening actually didn't happen. There was a little twist that occurred with that, and I did enjoy the way it was handled because it didn't mean the other thing happened. I'm being vague on purpose, I know. There was also a final twist at the very end that I think is supposed to act as a way of drawing you back in for the second book. I don't know if it was a strong enough twist to do that for me or not. If I'm being completely honest, I was surprised and I'm intrigued, but not enough to really want to pick up the next book right away. While there was a bit more adventuring in the second half of the book and it had slightly higher stakes going on, it still just feels like the plot overall is very thin. There isn't a ton truly happening. Even with that, I had a great time reading this. Like, the atmosphere and the way the writing just draws you in to this world and the story made it very addicting, and I didn't want to stop. In terms of world and the fantastical element I was complaining about in the first update, this did have some things that started to push that boundary further into fantasy. This was just such a weird book to rate because I had a really good time reading it, but objectively, I knew there was a lot in it that I just really wouldn't like if I wasn't so sucked in by the writing and the atmosphere. So I do think I am gonna say officially that my estimated rating was correct, and I'm gonna go with 3.5 stars on this one. Overall, an enjoyable book. I had a great time reading it. Fantastically done, even if it wasn't the most exciting plot I've ever come across. Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into 𝗖cie by Natalie C. Parker. The narrator in the audiobook is Levenseller, who also did all of the Lunar Chronicles audiobooks. So I just hear her voice and it automatically puts me into like a fantastical mindset. This is obviously a fantastical world. As you can tell from this video, I went into this expecting pirates, and they kind of are pirates, but they're kind of not pirates. Like, their mission is to raid and plunder, but they do so in in retaliation to this warlord who is responsible for hurting many of these women's family, I must also explain that the entire ship is manned by women. That was an odd way to put that, but yes. One thing I'm having a hard time with is can't create an image of this world in my head. I'm having a very hard time doing it. I don't know if it's because there hasn't really been enough explanations, and I mean, I don't need info dumping, but like a bit more would be preferable, because I just don't really understand, like, what is their world supposed to look like? Is it sci-fi fantasy? There's all of these ships and like nautical things, and the way life itself seems to be run is not modern day, but they have bits of technology. Like, they have suits that allow them to walk underwater. Their ships can be run by wind power, but it also has some sort of like a solar energy aspect that can power it also. Is it sci-fi? Is it kind of steampunk-esque maybe? Almost like Treasure Planet sort of situation. As I mentioned, the ship itself is run by all women. Our captain is Caledonia, and we are seeing from her perspective. There is sort of a possible enemies to lovers being set up, but if I'm being completely honest, I am not here for that. I am much more ship Caledonia with her female best friend slash second mate Pisces. Caledonia feels like the only character that is fully fleshed out. We have many other named characters. None of them really have personalities. They each have one distinct characteristic about them, and that's kind of all we really see. The plot itself is fine. It's kind of thin. It's just not really hooking me. One thing I will praise a lot is the action sequences, because those scenes are very descriptive, and I can actually see the fight playing out in my head. I can really understand how each person is moving, how they're working, like what their responses are. Those scenes, very fun. They get me a lot more engaged in the story than the plot has, but that's about it. I'm kind of disappointed with this one so far. For my estimated rating, I feel bad putting it this low, but honestly, I think my estimated rating right now is about a 2 stars. Like, it's meh. I don't think I would even really put it at good. It's just kind of meh. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished Seafire by Natalie C. Parker, and I'm sorry to say I think my estimated rating was correct. I went with about 2 stars on this one. Unfortunately, pretty much every major aspect of the story was just underwhelming and underdeveloped. Starting out, the biggest one that really bugged me was characters. On this ship, there are 50 women working, and way too many of them have names and no personality or depth. Pretty much every character, excluding our main one, Caledonia, is incredibly two-dimensional. I suppose an argument could be made for her best friend, who's also her first mate, and then maybe 1 or 2 of the other major players on the ship. But even then, it's very much like they have one base personality trait, and that's it. Because I didn't care about the characters, I in turn didn't care about the dynamics between them. I didn't care about their relationships, which was really unfortunate because there's a romantic element, so I also just didn't care about that. The male character had no personality at all. I have no idea what Caledonia possibly could have been interested in, apart from maybe the fact she was straight and was constantly surrounded by 50 other women, and you know, first guy she saw, her hormones went crazy. Speaking of romantic elements and being 50 other women, I was a little shocked there wasn't more representation of sapphic elements in this. There is a tiny hint to a possible relationship between 2 side characters, but that's about it. I will say there was good diversity across the board since there is 50 people on this ship. That was at least something, but I just didn't care about any of them. The plot was very slow. I read the synopsis and I thought it was just so basic, so I had an expectation going in, and I really figured that meant that the plot could just blow me out of the water. Don't think anything was really driving the story until maybe halfway through the book, and then the ending made it feel like everything that had happened up until this point was for naught. With the writing, the other really big thing that annoyed me was I just couldn't really get my footing in this world. I still don't really understand what is it supposed to be like. It kind of has an old world feel and everything is very sea-based, but there's futuristic technology involved. But in that case, why is everything sea-based? Why does the world itself feel old? What's the history there? What's the reasoning behind all of this? Nothing was explained well enough to really engage me. It wasn't anything special. I ended up going with 2 stars. I'm probably not going to continue the series. It's a shame. Hopefully I will enjoy the next one more. Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point in All the Stars and Teeth by Adalyn Grace, and first off, I have to say the very base plot of this book is incredibly similar to the animated movie Sinbad and the Legend of the Seven Seas, excluding having an amazingly charismatic villain that is voiced by Michelle Pfeiffer. But because of that, the plot has me so engaged. I'm really enthralled and have been blasting through this book. There's a map and reference guide in the beginning of the book, which told me pretty early on that I could expect a well-developed magic system as well as a gorgeously created world, and I haven't been disappointed thus far. This is a island-based kingdom in which each of the islands has a different magic specialty. It is all ruled by our one kingdom and the center island, and our main character, Amora, is the princess for said kingdom. She has been trained in soul magic for most of her life, and when I tell you that her magic is insanely badass, I really mean it. There's plenty of feminist undertones going on with our main character, Amora. She's often underestimated and has been a bit sheltered by her father, even though she's been trained in this magic style for years now and is very proficient with it. She's a bit sassy, a bit hardcore, but she's definitely pretty self-centered as well. She doesn't really think about others. Oh, and also, she is kind of a stab first, ask questions later sort of gal. I was surprised whenever there was a scene in which Amora actually gets her period, but I must say that's awesome that Adalyn Grace thought to include that into a fantasy book, because you don't really see that oftentimes, and it's helping to normalize a healthy female body, so always here for that. Amora starts her adventure on a pirate ship with two men, one of which is her betrothed, and although she doesn't really feel romantically inclined towards him, obviously there is sort of an element of romance with him. However, on the opposite side, our pirate character Bastion is kind of like a rebel with the cause sort of character. Kind of seems like he might be a ladies' man, has a sort of mysterious aura about him because we don't know a lot about his background, but he flirts it up with Amora, which then annoys Finnick, so he and Finnick kind of butt heads sometimes. Finnick, her fiance—
I look like an egg, but I said Finnick like the fox. His name is Ferrick.
Finnick is kind of our nerdy character. He doesn't have a lot of fighting abilities, but he is actually a healer from his magic. On top of that, he doesn't really have his sea legs. He's trying to constantly protect Amora, even though she doesn't really need protecting. The trio all play off each other very well so far. And then finally, a new character has recently been introduced. I don't think it's a spoiler because the back of the book mentions a mermaid. So we recently met our mermaid. I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't know how to pronounce her name, so I will put it up here on the screen. Although they call her a mermaid, her powers seem more siren-esque and are pretty badass as well. For the time being, I think I'm gonna give an estimated rating of 4 stars. I really think if the end of this book holds up to the rest, I'm probably gonna love this series and continue on to the second book.
Hey guys, I've officially finished All the Stars and Teeth by Adalyn Grace, and this was a really fun book overall. I had a very good time with it. Towards the latter half specifically, I think one of the things that was really driving it was there was so much action and it became very fast paced. All of the fight scenes were very well, it sounds weird to say choreographed in terms of books, but like it seems like they were well written out in terms of choreography. Along with that, all the fight scenes became a lot darker and more brutal as the book continued until we hit the final climax, which was a ride and I wasn't particularly expecting. I wasn't terribly floored by what occurred either, but it was still a ride. Amora becomes a lot more unapologetically dark. She starts to resemble more of an anti-hero character and just become very merciless in what she is doing at times, which I really appreciated. But with that, she does start to gain a bit of a martyr complex, which I'm not a fan of, and I really just wanted to be like, please get over yourself. Bastion also finally gained a bit of depth. We learn a bit about his tragic past as we see some more emotion from him. I do think it gave Bastion more of a 3D feel. I still would say Amora is probably the best fleshed out character in the story. Bastion probably comes in a close second. Even with that, however, this wasn't quite as insta-lovey as Fable, but I still just didn't feel like there was much of a basis for the romantic relationship there. They knew more about each other, but they didn't really have enough chemistry in their interactions for me to be convinced by the relationship, I'll put it that way. We also had a final bit of world building in a very interesting way. It kind of explained more of the history in this world. I actually really liked that section. It was very trippy in the beginning because I didn't really understand what was happening. It was a bit of like an info dump session, but I think it was handled in an elegant way other than just suddenly spewing a bunch of information at us out of nowhere. With this one, I kind of had the same thing I had with Fable, which is this is a part of a duology, but I actually don't really feel a ton of pull to pick up the second book. This ending is fairly satisfying, at least it's satisfying for me, but I can see that there is more to the story to be told. I just don't care to really hear about it. Unfortunately, my estimated rating was not correct. I do think this was still better than 3 stars, however, so I think I'm gonna round it to 3.5. I had a good time with this book. It was very entertaining. The world building in this was really exquisite. If world building is like the one thing you focus on in books, I think you'll have a great time with this. Even if you don't absolutely adore world building, I still think this is like a really fun ride to read, and I would recommend it.
Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and unsurprisingly, I'm in love with this book already. I was reading this at the gym yesterday, and I managed to run 2.5 miles in under 20 minutes without even realizing it. And I hate running, which is really saying something, because I was so sucked into the book. The one negative thing I heard about this going in was that the world felt a bit underdeveloped, and I do have to agree, at least for thus far. We get a good bit of exposition around the history and a little bit about the magic in both perspectives at the beginning of the book, and then occasionally we have some additional facts that are dropped in every once in a while, but it still just doesn't really feel as cohesive as it could be. We know that there are multiple different kingdoms in this world, and each of them is known for something specific. For example, our male main character, Adalyn, his family is descendants of King Midas, so obviously they are known for gold. We also know that the world is island-based, and there is a good deal of water. I think having a map in this book would have been useful for that, just to help visualize the world a bit more, but we don't have one, unfortunately. Like I said, we know there is magic, but it doesn't really ever get elaborated upon very much, and I do wish there would be more of that specifically. We alternate between the two perspectives of Adalyn, who is a prince, a pirate, and a siren hunter, and then Lyra, who is the siren princess. Her mother is very clearly the 𝗖cie character, and she is the Sea Queen. And because she is Lyra's mother, I think having her as the villain of the story makes the entire feel a lot darker, and I really have been enjoying that. The scenes that are rewritten to mirror those quintessential moments from The Little Mermaid just have such a darker undercurrent in them. They have a lot more tension and angst there, and I'm really enjoying that. I also love the parallels we've seen between Adalyn and Lyra. While Adalyn is a prince, he doesn't really want to be one. He rather use his title only when it's beneficial for him, but whereas Lyra is doing her best to try and prove herself worthy to eventually become Sea Queen. They're both pretty ruthless, I will say, but kind of in their own ways. Adalyn's very charismatic, is sort of like you don't want to underestimate him, whereas Lyra is just straight vicious. I've very much been enjoying her characterization. Obviously, one of the most important updates to the story is the whole scenario of Ariel losing her voice, but in this it is Lyra being turned into a human and no longer being able to utilize her siren song, which I think was a very clever way to redo that aspect of the story. The whole atmosphere of the book in general just feels a lot darker than the other books I've read thus far. It just kind of has like this eerie, fantastical feel. We do have some side characters that I don't think are quite as well characterized as Adalyn and Lyra, but is better characterized than like the crew in Seafire. They have a bit more depth. I also am just so here for the enemies to lovers aspect. The dramatic irony that is Adalyn being a siren hunter and Lyra being a siren on his ship and him not realizing, I'm so here for that. It's so entertaining. I've learned from my past mistakes that I never estimate 5 stars on a book because I'm always disappointed. I'm gonna estimate 4 stars on this one for now because I'm really enjoying it and I am hopeful that this will be a new favorite. I understand it has flaws, but I'm having such a great time that I kind of don't even care. Hey y'all, so I officially finished To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and I went and bought this on my lunch break today when I still had 2 chapters left in the book. If that doesn't tell you how much I was enjoying this, I don't know what will. I just have to say right out of the gate, this book is not going to be for everybody. It is slow paced, it is very character focused. There is tons of exposition, and it has a pretty dark tone for a YA fantasy in that sweet, sweet edge kind of way, but I loved it. By the end of this book, the characters were really alive. They just hopped off the page. I came to adore them a great deal. I loved seeing the growth and development from Adalyn and Lyra from the beginning of the book to the end. The story took quite a while to build up, but by the time we hit the climax, I was so engaged. I could not put the book down. I was so hooked. I was blasting through it. I didn't want to stop. I was on the edge of my seat for the entire climax. I continued to adore the retelling aspect of this story. It made it so that this felt exciting and kind of scary, but like in a very familiar way. By the end of the book, probably the only complaint I really have is about the world building. We were still learning things about this world around the 80% mark. Because of that, it just felt like the entire world never seemed complete. With that being said, however, Christo gave me what I wanted when I went into this video idea. She gave me that fantastic atmospheric pirate story with a well-developed enemies to lovers relationship and swashbuckling adventures. I finished those last 2 chapters and had a few tabs. I went in and tabbed some of the previous lines. I need to go find the rest of them and add some tabs there also. This might not have been a 5-star book in reality. If I actually went through and nitpicked everything and gave scores that actually were representative, it probably wouldn't be. But because of how much I loved and enjoyed this ride, 5 stars. This is a 5 stars, 100%. I loved it. It was just the perfect kind of read for me. This was great. I loved it. Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller, and I have read 3.5 hours of this audiobook all this afternoon. That's how entertained I am. I really just think the perfect description for this book is a pirate rom-com. It is so fun, it is so entertaining. I can't stop reading it. The banter is fantastic. I really enjoy that. But if I'm being completely honest, that is literally all that is going on in this book. This is probably the first fantasy romance book that I've actually really enjoyed because it's not taking itself too seriously. Levenseller isn't attempting to create a full-out fantasy world on top of having a decent romance. She is purely focusing on the romance. You can tell because there's hardly any world building. We know our main character, 𝗖адц이's father, is a pirate king. He basically rules over the entirety of the seas. No one will mess with him. Even the people on land have a great deal of respect for him and don't want to piss him off. There's very little atmosphere. The plot is very, very minimal. It is literally what we are told in the synopsis, which is she is trying to find a map that is somewhere on this ship. Majority of the writing is dialogue, and I'm having such a great time. The banter is so entertaining. It's got some of those kitschy tropes, like there's only one bed, flirty fighting scenes. It is not at all what I expected going in. I really thought it would have more of a piratey aspect to it. I suppose there's like adventuring going on. It does get a bit brutal here and there, like the last scene that just took place was a lot more hardcore than anything else we've seen thus far. But yeah, apart from that, this is a rom-com. This is straight up a rom-com set on a pirate ship, and I'm so here for it. The only 2 characters who have any amount of depth is 𝗖адц이, who has a badass upbringing. She is sassy, she is snarky, she is smart. She also is kind of on a hair trigger. She's a bit of an adrenaline junkie. And she always thinks she's the smartest in the room, which isn't necessarily always true. Then we have Raiden, who is our pirate captor's brother. Smart, cocky, handsome, definitely rebellious. He does have a heart of gold, wants to be better than just a pirate, but he's stuck on a pirate ship. Apart from them, pretty much everybody else kind of falls into basic character archetype. Okay, so that's atmosphere, writing, plot, all not being great, and then characters being like okay. That does not change the fact that entertainment value of this book is a 5 stars. With that being said, I'm not expecting to give this book 5 stars. Like, I don't think it's going to blow me out of the water at the end. I don't think this is life-changing. I don't expect this to be a new favorite, but I'm having a great time anyway, and this is probably the first book I've read so far that's part of the series that I actually might continue. My estimated rating, 4 stars, 100%. This is a great time. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished the last book for this video, Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller. Not only that, I also finished the sequel. I read the entirety of it today. This shit was just a whole lot of fun. The characters, apart from 𝗖cie and Bryden, are fairly bland. The atmosphere and world building, pretty minimal. There wasn't even much of a plot in the first book until maybe 65% in, and things that happened just seem to sort of defy logic a little bit. That being said, damn did I have a great time. Like I said, the first half of the book is very much a rom-com, whereas the second half is more akin to a adventure-y popcorn flick. There was a lot more sword fights, there were escape scenes, there were near-death experiences. I was hooked all the way through, could not stop. The second half of the book leaned more into those fantastical elements of the world. We learn more about sirens, some of their abilities, especially having read this one right after To Kill a Kingdom, where sirens were also a major point. They didn't seem nearly as well rounded and created, so it kind of felt as though Tricia Levenseller was just making it up as the story went along. By the very end of the first book, one thing I really loved is just how unapologetic 𝗖cie is for who she is. She knows what she wants. She will do anything necessary to get what she wants. She's a very strong character physically and mentally, but she's still pretty feminine, and I really appreciated that. She knows how to use her femininity also, and that particular scene, oh my god, I was howling laughing. It was so funny. The end of the first book had some big Jack Sparrow energy.
There should be a captain in there somewhere.
Cunning, but not too well thought out. Talented, but surviving on luck. As I said, this was just a fun ride all of the way through. I had such a great time. My last note was I will be picking up the next one, but by the time I finished the first, I was so engaged, I just went right into the second because my library had the audiobook. All in all, these were just a fun time. I wouldn't consider them amazing books or anything. I think, in all honesty, I would rate both of them 3.5 stars. They fulfill that feeling of whimsy. I think Levenseller really hit the nail on the head with this series in trying to match that same feel that you get from Pirates of the Caribbean. All right, guys, so that is it. As always, thank you so much for coming to my channel today. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have my Goodreads, Storygraph, and Insta all linked in the description if you're interested in following me. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!